The top business stories live from Sky News' headquarters. High street lender Santander to close 95 branches with 750 jobs at risk. Ben & Jerry's accuses Unilever of ousting its chief executive over the ice cream brand's political activism. Plus, a major step forward in the robot revolution. We meet the Humanoid that's just started work. A very good afternoon and welcome to Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey, on this Wednesday. We're going to start with the news that Santander has announced plans to close nearly a quarter of its high street branches. The high street retailer and lender says that the continued move to online banking is the main reason for the closures. 95 of its 445 UK branches will shut, putting up to 750 jobs at risk. Well, let's get more on this with our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso, who's with me in the studio. Paul, just talk us through the Santander's rationale for these changes.
Well, it's another expression of the shift in the way we all access our bank accounts, much more engagement via telephones and digital banking, and that's changing, reducing bluntly the need for the real estate that banks have traditionally occupied. Santander is one of the biggest retail banks operating in the UK. 444 branches hitherto, but this announcement, they're going to close 95 of those branches. That's 1 in 5. That will leave 349 of those 750 jobs under threat from a workforce of around 20,000 people in the UK. That is obviously a blow to those people involved. Clearly, those staff and those customers who might rely on those particular branches. It was quite interesting what some of the announcements around the edges of that central announcement of the closures. They're looking to shift to different ways of banking people. They're talking about opening more banking hubs. That is places that essentially, instead of having 5, you might have 1. Those are not numbers from the bank, I should say. Also, what they are calling work cafes. So these are banking facilities that are less than you might expect, so no counters in some of these. That presumably means fewer people or no people, but you can access some of the digital services, the paying in and withdrawing from ATMs, and also having some banks that essentially sound like they're mobile, moving around local communities.
Like an old school library.
Essentially that, banking, which is something many other banks have talked about as they're looking to reduce their footprint.
But recognising at the same time that there are pensioners, for example,
indeed,
who
there are many people
services.
who are not as comfortable banking digitally, or indeed need access to cash. All of this coming, of course, as Santander has spent much of the last few months denying that reports that it is thinking about quitting the UK. It insisted it is remaining here. It's striking too that it should be cutting branches. I'm reminded of earlier in the year when Donald Trump addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos. On stage to ask him questions were some executives. One, the chief executive of the Bank of America, the only European on stage was the chief executive of Santander, and she took the opportunity to point out that she had more branches of the Bank of America and was seen as making a little bit of a statement of European independence. Well, she's got slightly fewer branches now.
Yeah, I know.
In the UK.
I always feel slightly torn about this because, I do recognise that lots of people still do go into bank branches, but frankly, can I remember the last time I went into a bank branch? I'm sure there are millions of others who haven't been in for a very long time, and so you can see some of the economic rationale. Paul, as always, thank you very much indeed, Paul Kelso, there on that Santander story. Now to the world of tech and some big announcements at NVIDIA, one of the so-called Magnificent 7 tech giants in the United States. The company's unveiled a new generation of artificial intelligence chips designed to power future advancements in robotics, and announced a new deal with General Motors to use NVIDIA technology in its new fleet of self-driving cars. Let's speak to Dan Ives, Global Head of Technology Research at Wedbush Securities. Dan, always a pleasure. Just talk us through what NVIDIA are announcing today on this idea of robotics. They're suggesting that, we might see these robots not just in our factories, but walking on the streets in a couple of years' time.
Oh, and I think, look, if you look in California, you're already starting to see food deliveries in LA that are robots, in certain parts. And I think this is all about physical AI. autonomous robotics. That's the future. In other words, the golden age of AI is just starting. And I think what you saw from the godfather of AI, Jensen, NVIDIA, they're laying out the future. Despite some of the fears in terms of tech stocks today, we're in year 3 of a 10-year build-out.
And they're obviously talking about chips, aren't they? There have been a suggestion with DeepSeek that actually maybe chips weren't as important as we thought in terms of the overall power. They're making the argument, actually, whether it's AI or whether it's actually robots themselves, they still need increasingly powerful chip technology.
Yeah, there's one chip in the world. There's one red phone to get these chips. It's NVIDIA and Jensen. And I think the reality is DeepSeek, we continue to say if you add a few commas to 6 million, that's what they really spend. And, I think the reality is that NVIDIA continues to be their world, everyone else paying rent when it comes to AI. And that's why I believe what you're seeing at GTC, they're laying out the vision in terms of AI revolution.
And talking about robotics and AI and essentially technology, it seems like it may all come together. Well, it is already coming together, we should be honest about this, in terms of self-driving cars. I was speaking to someone involved in Uber in Texas only a couple of days ago, suggesting, the technology is just getting better and better. It is now a matter of time. We're about to kind of turn the corner, if you like. We've talked about self-driving cars, it feels like, for decades, Dan. Do you think we're about to turn the corner in all of this?
Look, I think if you have an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid, I don't believe they're going to need a driver's license.
Wow, okay.
In other words, that's where we're not talking 10, 15 years. We are talking 4 to 5 years to where autonomous is going to become more common. I think ultimately you could see 25, 30% of vehicles on the road at one point that will be autonomous, as we get into the latter part of the decade.
Well, talking about cars, we cannot not talk about Elon Musk. We were speaking to one of the original investors in Tesla yesterday, suggesting that he either needs to quit his government job or he needs to step down as CEO because he's not looking after the company properly. What's your sense on that? Are investors getting a little bit angsty about the share price, or do they still believe in Elon? Because ultimately, it's a company that actually, when you look at the share price, yes, it's down quite sniffily, but compared to 6 months ago, it's actually not far off where it was then.
Look, Musk is Tesla, Tesla is Musk. And the hearts and lungs of Tesla is Elon. Now, clearly what we're going through today, it's been white knuckles with brand issues, the Doge, and obviously Trump administration, and, definitely the blowback that we're seeing from some of that we're seeing around the world. Look, I've talked about it. It's a balance. And I think right now there's no balance. Now, for Musk and Tesla, that's why this is a moment of truth. This is a time, and we've been here many times over the last decade with Musk. This is the time for him to recognize things and actually make some changes. And I think that it's going to be a pivotal few months ahead here. But I still believe there's the biggest disruptive technology player in the world, along with NVIDIA, next decade.
Well, that's the other interesting thing, is that while Tesla's having a bumpy ride, X, formerly known as Twitter, is essentially now valued at what he bought it for. And SpaceX is, well, it's got rocket boosters, no pun intended.
Yeah, and obviously the astronauts that got picked up in space. Look, it comes down to, with Musk, that's always been the quagmire, right? The genius of Musk, and then there's obviously some of the antics. For Tesla investors, it comes down to they're the ones right now getting the gut punch because of some of these Doge efforts and others, whether you agree or disagree. But I think, as I've said, I think clock struck midnight. It's time for Musk to peel back.
OK, Dan, it is always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Dan Ives there, joining us live from New Jersey. Thank you. Now, speaking about robots, Sky News has been given rare access to a humanoid robot that could one day help produce cars around the world. Apollo is nearly 6 feet tall, can lift more than 25 kilograms and potentially perform repetitive tasks. Our science and technology editor Tom Clark reports now on what's been described as a significant step forward in the robot revolution.
As new hires go, it's a little slow and doesn't say much, but it's persistent, precise and never needs a toilet break. Meet Apollo, the first humanoid robot in the world to work in manufacturing. And no pressure, it's only the Mercedes-Benz plant in Berlin where the 5'8" android is surrounded by much larger, more experienced robots.
My view is that these robots are going to be a big part of our everyday life, and this is the very beginning of us seeing these robots out in the public. How the workers react to them and really be smart about the way that we push these early into production and then out into the world.
Apptronic, the Texas-based firm behind Apollo, is being cautious for a reason. Falling costs of components and breakthroughs in AI and computer vision have led to an explosion of startups touting humanoid robots and hype. But few have taken the first jerky steps out of the lab. We're told this is the first public demonstration of a humanoid robot carrying out an everyday task, in this case, assembling an engine part in a real workplace, and done so entirely autonomously, without human control.
A super intelligent machine.
Mercedes has made a multi-million-dollar investment in Apptronic and will lead this trial of the robots at this plant and another in Hungary. But what can the experimental robot do that's better than their existing tried and tested robots?
There's one big advantage. The humanoid robot is flexible, so you can basically introduce a humanoid robot in an assembly line, or especially in intralogistics and or quality inspection, and you can basically move it from one place to another.
Humanoid robots could one day do the tasks too dull, dirty or dangerous for humans to do, and make up for labour shortages in an ageing society. Developers are using natural human movement to train robots' AI brains to behave more like us. But AI, and therefore a robot that can understand the real world like we can, is a way off. So the important questions like when and how robots might take our jobs and whether they could rise up against us can wait for a little while at least. Tom Clark, Sky News, Berlin.
Well, from one practical technology to another, we're going to talk about cooling cans, because it's a bit of an age-old problem, isn't it, that many businesses have been trying to solve but failed. And that is, how do you stop canned drinks from getting warm? Well, now, a Welsh inventor appears to have come up with that very answer. And some of the world's biggest drinks companies, unsurprisingly, are keen to get involved. James Vice has created a self-cooling can that brings the temperature of a drink down to just 7 degrees in a matter of moments. And I began by asking him in an interview a little earlier about how he came about this invention.
So my background's been in the drinks industry, and as you explained clearly, there's always a pain point when drinking on the go, whether you're at a festival, it's a blazing hot day and your can goes warm. There's nothing worse.
I know,
so
believe me, I know.
Yeah, so, you know, we live in 2025, technology is never greater, so why not have a can that can cool itself? So I jumped in head first. And locked myself in a bedroom for about 2 years, and I was adamant to crack the code that has never been cracked before. And as of today, we have the world's first commercially viable self-cooling beverage can.
Now, I don't expect you, James, to give away all your secrets, but can you give us a demonstration of kind of how it works, if you like?
Yeah, so here it just looks like a traditional can, but actually there's a button underneath. And as you push the button, now keep your eye on this snowflake and you'll see the colour of the snowflake start to turn. So actually you'll turn the can upside down, you'll hold down the button briefly. And then actually, as you're doing that, you'll start to feel the can going cold, and you give it a little swirl. And there you see the snowflake starting to change colour and the can is starting to cool. It's pretty instant. And we use very safe, non-toxic methods, and it's fully recyclable like you would a traditional can. And we're very excited here at Delta Innovations.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. And excited too about the prospect that lots of the world's beer companies and soft drinks companies and others must be saying, give us this technology.
You're absolutely right. And at the minute, we're speaking to some absolutely huge brands. We're still young. We're still got, there's a long way to go. And I'm very, very ambitious. I want this to become, dare I say it, the next Tetra Pak. And we should be proud here in the UK. We have an amazing amount of entrepreneurs here in the UK. And, you never know. My name's James. It could be the second coming of James Dyson.
Well, that was James Vise there, who has invented that self-cooling can that I suspect could be quite useful as we approach the summer. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be looking at how the markets are doing this afternoon. The FTSE barely moved today. Talking about that and Ben & Jerry's. Big row there in just a couple of minutes. Do stay tuned.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama.
Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Flying fly better. Thank you.
Very welcome back to Sky News. We're just going to bring you up to date with some breaking news coming in from the Crown Prosecution Service, and that is Panjak Lamba, age 23, has been charged with the murder of Harshita Barella, who was found dead in a car boot in Ilford in East London in November of 2024. So he has been charged. We remember that there was a police hunt underway after Harshita Barella's body was found in a car boot in Ilford in East London. That suspect, Mr. Lamba, has now been charged by the Crown Prosecution Service. OK, let's have a look at how the markets are doing this afternoon. Let's bring in Lindsay James, investment strategist at Quilter Investors. Very good afternoon to you, Lindsay. I'm going to start with Ben & Jerry's, if we can. Just talk us through what is going on there at, one of the most famous ice cream companies in the world.
That's right, one I'm very partial to. But unfortunately, they fired the chief executive, Dave Stever. He's been with the company since 1988. And Ben & Jerry's have said that there have been repeated attempts now by Unilever to really silence the social mission of the company. And this is after Unilever promised to support that very same social mission when they acquired them in 2000. It's, of course, really a core part of the Ben & Jerry's DNA. So a massive reversal in their support for the business. And I think it reflects the wider cultural wars that we've seen with companies targeted by Conservatives for taking a stance on topics outside of their core business. So I think they no longer have the appetite for it and they see it just as a risk rather than an opportunity.
And why no longer the appetite? What has changed? Is it fundamentally the political situation, not least of all, of course, Donald Trump back in the White House?
Well, I think that's part of it. But before that, of course, last year we saw Bud being targeted for taking a stance on certain issues. And I think this is something where really Conservatives have mobilised their voice to try and challenge corporates who they feel are going outside of their remit, maybe even lecturing people on their views in some ways. So, it's a shame because Ben & Jerry's have done this since really they first came about. It's been part of the business for a long, long time. And I think a lot of people would feel quite supportive towards some of their views. So it's a pity that Unilever have backtracked on promises here.
Talking about political views, this is a really interesting big question, isn't it? We've just been talking about Elon Musk earlier on in the programme. We've seen protests outside some Tesla facilities and places associated with Elon Musk in the United States. And a lot of that is about his politics, isn't it? And that's the essence of where should companies get involved in politics? Should they stay out? They never seem to. And when they do, they can get themselves into trouble.
Yeah, we've seen that to an enormous degree with Tesla. And I think it's not just about the views of Elon Musk, but it's also been about the fact that he seems to have really taken his eye off the ball with his business. So I think we've been hearing increasing volume about pleas for him to return to focus on that business, which I think are quite well founded.
Yeah, indeed. And I've heard from at least one investor saying he may well have to step aside if he doesn't quit that government job. Do you think that's realistic? I mean, I was talking to Dan Ives earlier who was saying that essentially, Elon Musk is Tesla and Tesla is Elon Musk. You just can't get away from that.
I think you need to be careful what you wish for. Let's not forget, Tesla is valued very highly on a multiple of 90 times next year's expected earnings. That's around 4 times the valuation of Nvidia for comparison. And this is not the sort of valuation you would expect to see for a typical car company, even one growing quite quickly, which at the moment Tesla isn't. This is really about the opportunities for innovation in adjacent areas. It's about robo-taxis, it's about the humanoid robots. And Elon Musk is the man who would deliver that. I think if we saw a new CEO coming in, you wouldn't see the same valuation for the business. It would be valued as a car business, and that would suggest further downside for the shares. So what we need to see is him stepping aside from Doge for many reasons, but really for Tesla shareholders to focus on the business again.
And just very finally, Lindsay, big week for interest rates, both here and in the US.
Yeah, That's right, we'll be hearing from the Federal Reserve tonight. Now, there's no expectations there of an interest rate cut. Let's not forget that they've got a dual mandate. They've got to focus on full employment and price stability. There's cracks emerging in the employment picture, and we're also seeing inflation expectations starting to shoot up. So they've got to walk a very careful path there. And I think they're going to be very careful about calling inflation transitory once again, when perhaps it isn't. And then tomorrow we're going to hear from the Bank of England, where similarly we're not expecting a rate cut at this point. We need to see a little bit of a better picture emerging on the inflation point in months to come. And then I think we may see those cuts coming through later in the year in the UK.
OK, Lindsay, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, Lindsay James there on the markets. Thank you. OK, that is it for me on Business Live for today. We're back, of course, at 11:30 tomorrow morning. Please do join me then if you can. Coming up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin, including live coverage from the White House. We're expecting the daily press briefing on the day that we know that Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky have spoken on the phone in the last couple of hours. That first conversation since the notorious Oval Office showdown last month. That's with Mark in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned for that, and I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.